A singer can take a song. He can just sing the words, or he can make it his own. He can pour his whole life into it. Elvis did this with a lot of songs, but there was one song. It was from a movie he made, and it was about a rough traveling man, a guy who moves around. He works at a carnival, he sets things up, he takes them down, he's always on the go. He's a bit of an outsider, he doesn't stay put. This song, for Elvis, was more than just a movie tune. It became a mirror, it showed his own life. Think about what a roustabout is. He's a worker, he's strong, he's maybe a bit dirty, he's always traveling, he builds things up. Then he tears them down, he doesn't have roots, he doesn't have a permanent home. His life is a string of temporary stops. He sees a lot of places, he meets a lot of people, but he never really belongs anywhere. He's always moving on, he lives by his own rules, mostly. He's independent, but maybe he's also a little bit lonely. He's got that freedom, but it comes with a cost. He's always looking for the next thing. The next job, the next town. It's a life of constant motion, and it's a life of always being on the outside looking in. Elvis's life started out like that in some ways. He wasn't born into luxury. His family was poor, they moved around a bit, from Tupelo, Mississippi to Memphis, Tennessee. He wasn't a carnival worker, no, but he was a kind of drifter. He was a kid finding his way. He was an outsider in school, he dressed differently, he liked different music. He stood out, and that feeling of not quite fitting in, that feeling of always being a little bit different, it stuck with him. He had this restless energy, a drive to be somewhere else, to be something else. He wasn't content to just stay put. He had dreams, big ones, and those dreams pulled him forward. They made him move. When he started making music, it was another kind of movement. He hit the road, he played small clubs, he played auditoriums, he traveled across the South. He drove a lot, he slept in cheap motels, he hauled his own gear, he worked hard. He hustled. He was trying to make it. It was a tough life, a touring life, a life of constantly being in a new town, playing for new faces, then packing up and leaving again. This was his early roustabout phase. He was building his career, he was building his name, but he was doing it one town at a time, always on the move, always searching for that break, that moment when things would click. Then things exploded. He became famous, very famous, overnight famous. But did the constant movement stop? No, it just got bigger. The small clubs became huge stadiums. The cheap motels became fancy hotels. The car rides became private jets, but the core of it stayed the same. He was still traveling. He was still performing. He was still living out of a suitcase. He was still waking up in a new place almost every day. He was still always on the road. The scale changed, the luxury changed, but the rootlessness remained. He was still a man always going somewhere, always leaving somewhere. He was always putting on a show. And then he was always moving on to the next show. Think about the sheer grind of it. The endless tours. The schedule was brutal. Get on the bus, get on the plane, arrive in a city, sound check, eat, get ready, go on stage, give everything. Sweat, sing, dance, thrill the crowd, come off stage, adrenaline crash, pack up. Sleep a few hours, get on the bus or plane again, repeat, day after day, week after week, month after month. There was no real downtime, no true settling. It was a blur of hotel rooms, a blur of highways, a blur of faces in the crowd. He was everywhere, but he was nowhere specific for long. He was a visitor, always a visitor, never truly home. That's a roustabout. The song's lyrics talk about being a wanderer, about having no fixed address. It talks about being tough, about being able to handle himself. And this fit Elvis's image too. He was the rebel, the rock and roller, the guy who shook things up. He was seen as a bit dangerous, a bit wild. He broke the rules, he defied expectations. He wasn't some tame crooner. He was a force of nature. And this image, this persona, it was part of the roustabout spirit. The spirit of someone who doesn't quite conform. Someone who walks his own path. Even if that path is a winding, endless road. Then came Hollywood. He started making movies. A lot of movies. Quickly. One after another. This was another kind of roustabout life. He was tied to a studio. Yes. He was in one place for a few weeks or months, but he was still moving from project to project, from character to character. It was still a job, still a performance. He was still putting on a show, but now it was for the camera. It was a different kind of grind. He didn't always love it. He often felt like he was just going through the motions. He felt like he was being moved around, like a piece on a chessboard. Not truly free. Not truly expressing himself, just doing what he was told. That's a different kind of roustabout. One who feels less like a free spirit and more like a hired hand. And then came Las Vegas, the big residency. For years, he was in one city. Yes, but was he settled? Not really. He was still performing every night, 2 shows a night sometimes, for weeks on end. It was another stage, another audience, another show, the same show, over and over. It became a routine, a demanding, exhausting routine. He was a roustabout tied to a post. He wasn't moving from town to town, but he was moving through the same performance. Night after night, he was still living a life that was all about the show, all about putting on an act, all about giving himself to the crowd. Even when he was tired, even when he was sad, even when he felt completely empty inside, he had to be the roustabout. He had to be the performer. The loneliness of it all. That's a big part of the roustabout's life. He meets people, he makes fleeting connections, but he never stays long enough for anything deep to grow. And Elvis, with all his fame, with all the millions of people who adored him, he was profoundly lonely. He was surrounded by an entourage, he was surrounded by fans, but how many true, deep connections could he really maintain when he was always moving? When he was always the center of attention, when he was always on a different level from everyone else, the roustabout is free, but he's also alone. And Elvis, in his gilded cage of fame, knew that feeling well. He was always chasing something, always looking for that anchor, but it always slipped away. The song talks about being free, about doing what you want, but Elvis often felt trapped. He was trapped by his image. He was trapped by his manager. He was trapped by his contracts. He was trapped by the expectations of millions. He had immense power as a star, but he had very little control over his own life. The decisions were often made for him. The path was often chosen for him. He was a superstar, but he was also a commodity. He was moved from place to place, project to project, performance to performance. He was a roustabout in someone else's carnival. Someone else was pulling the strings. And that must have been incredibly frustrating, to sing about freedom while feeling so confined. The pressure he faced was immense, always having to be Elvis, always having to be perfect, always having to deliver. The show must go on, no matter what, no matter how he felt, no matter what was happening in his personal life. The roustabout doesn't complain. He just does his job. He sets up the tent. He works the ride. He moves the equipment. For Elvis, too, just kept going. He kept performing. He kept singing. He kept putting on that smile. He kept giving his energy, even when he was hurting, even when he was sick. He pushed through because that was his job. That was his life. He was the ultimate showman, the ultimate roustabout. His relationships suffered, too. How do you build a lasting connection when you're rarely home? When you're constantly traveling, when you're always surrounded by people who want something from you? The women in his life, Priscilla, other girlfriends, they were drawn to him. They loved him. But it was incredibly hard to build a normal life with him. He was always leaving, always coming back, always moving. The roustabout lifestyle doesn't lend itself to stability. It's about fleeting moments, about intense, but often short-lived, connections. And Elvis's life reflected that. He craved love, he craved connection, but his life made it almost impossible to truly find and hold on to it. The emotional roller coaster was part of it, the highs of performance, the roar of the crowd, the pure adrenaline of being on stage, but then the crash, the quiet of the hotel room afterwards. The loneliness, the emptiness, the constant cycle of excitement and exhaustion. The roustabout experiences this too. The thrill of a new town, the energy of the carnival. But then the dismantling, the packing up, the leaving, the long, silent drive to the next unknown place. It's a life of extremes, high highs and low lows, and Elvis felt all of that deeply. He poured those emotions into his music. He lived them every single day. He had this tough exterior, the cool rebel, the king. But underneath it all, he was a sensitive soul. He was a searching soul. The song portrays a tough guy, a guy who can handle anything, who doesn't need anyone. But there's always a hint of something deeper. A bit of sadness, a bit of longing. And that was Elvis. He put on the bravado. He put on the show. But he was also vulnerable. He was also human. He felt things deeply. He struggled. He searched. He questioned. The roustabout is strong. But even the strong need a place to rest, a place to belong. And Elvis often didn't have that. Over the years, the meaning of the song probably deepened for him. When he first sang it, it might have been about youthful defiance, about the thrill of the open road, about being free and independent. But as he got older, as the demands grew heavier, as the loneliness became more profound, it must have taken on a different meaning. It became less about choice, and more about destiny, less about freedom, and more about a kind of beautiful, tragic entrapment. The song became his life, not just what he sang, but what he lived, the weary traveler, the man always on the move. The man who could never truly stop. The metaphor stretched beyond just physical movement. It became about his spiritual and emotional journey too. He was always looking for something more. Something to fill the void, something to give his life deeper meaning, whether it was through music, through movies, through martial arts, through spirituality. He was always searching, always exploring, always moving towards the next thing. The roustabout is always seeking the next stop, the next opportunity, the next thrill, and Elvis was always on that quest. A restless soul in a restless world. He moved fast. He lived hard. He never truly found that final resting place for his spirit. And this is why the song resonated, not just with Elvis, but with people who listened to it. Many people feel like roustabouts in their own lives. They feel like they're always moving, always searching, always trying to find their place, or just trying to get by. They might not be actual carnival workers, but they understand the feeling of being an outsider, or of being on the road, of having to keep pushing forward, no matter what. The song tapped into something universal, a sense of restlessness, a sense of determination, a sense of enduring. So when Elvis sang this song, he wasn't just delivering a line. He wasn't just acting, he was telling his own story. He was channeling his entire life experience into those words. Every time he performed it, he wasn't just singing about a character in a movie. He was singing about himself. He was the man who was always on the move. He was the man who faced challenges. He was the man who kept going. He was the man who was both free and constrained. He was the roustabout. He lived it. He breathed it. And he sang it with a truth that only he could bring. The song perfectly captured the essence of his extraordinary, but also incredibly challenging existence. It became his personal anthem, a testament to his life of constant motion, relentless performance, and deep, profound solitude amidst the adoration of millions. He was a wandering man. He was tough. He was strong. He was always moving. He was always performing. The roustabout.